Classic, simple, wonderful. There are a million reasons to love pizza, and one of them is its versatility. There are no rules to the infinite permutations of pizza other than what makes you happy. If we decide to play and we aren't afraid to get a little messy, we can find real happiness. I'm Jenny Randolph. Welcome to this day. Pizza. So our first step in making our own homemade pizza crust is starting with the stone. And you can see we use this one a lot. We are big pizza eaters around this house. But it's very important that if you go out and you buy a pizza stone and you're gonna use it in your oven, start your pizza stone in a cold oven. Put it in there and then heat up the temperature. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but you want the stone to heat up with the oven so that it is a whole temperature. The stone is hot, the oven's hot, everything's great. So that's our first step. We're gonna stick this in a cold oven, set the temperature to 450 degrees, and wait till it comes up to temp. Now, as we're waiting for that to come up to 450 degrees, the other thing is that you want it to be at that temperature for about 30 minutes, so you have plenty of time. Just make sure that if you're doing this for dinner, you allow that time, so it's not just the time of the preheating of the oven and the stone, but it's also one more half hour, 30 more minutes before that pizza stone is gonna be ready to go and cook the pizza. It'll be worth it because the pizzas cook super, super fast. But in the meantime, we're gonna get started making the dough for this pizza. And I have to tell you, this is one of the biggest struggles, and let me tell you why. This is a gluten-free pizza crust, and gluten-free stuff is not like the traditional pizza. When you're working with stuff that has wheat and gluten in it, it's really kind of easy because it binds and it stretches and you can roll. You cannot do that with this recipe. So there's some very specific steps that I'm gonna share with you today. So let's get started, and we'll start out with the crust. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to put in 2.5 cups of lukewarm water. And you can kind of, again, test it with your fingers. If you've seen my other episodes, you've seen me do this before. Now we want to add 2 teaspoons of sugar. And 1 packet of active dry yeast. We're gonna give that a bit of a mix, just so it can sit there. What we're doing is proofing the yeast. We're gonna watch and we're gonna make sure that it starts to fizz up and it starts to bubble. And that happens after about 5 minutes or so. So give yourself a little bit of time and watch that happen. Now that we've proofed the yeast, we're gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then 3.5 cups of your choice of gluten-free flour. Now here's the step that's a little bit different. With gluten-free flour, you're going to really, really want to mix this. And by mixing it, I mean when you start it, and I don't know if I showed you, but I do have the dough hook on here. You want the dough hook because it is a dough, and it is the best way to mix it. But you are going to want to leave this mixing for 4 to 5 minutes. And it's going to make all of the difference in the world. Don't cheat on this step because it really does make the dough stick together and give it enough air so that you'll have that puffy crust at the very end. So this next step might seem a little bit strange, but I am taking a jelly roll pan, like a small one, and I have flipped it over, so we're using the back side of it. And I have found that this is the best way to make this pizza crust work. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some vegetable shortening on the back of the jelly roll pan. So that's kind of our first step. Even though that this is the best way to do this, it's still kind of messy. And usually as adults, we try to stay away from messes. We try to not get ourselves messy. In fact, we're all about having a clean house and organized living and, you know, keeping kind of the mess and chaos at bay. But that's something that we've been talking about all month long, is being like a child. And obviously we're doing kicked up kids food. So, you know, it's the perfect opportunity to get in here, get messy with your hands, you know, leave all of your cares away. Most things wash up with some soap and water, so don't worry too much about it. And don't be afraid, because sometimes the best things and the most joyful times are in the kitchen with friends and family, and you're getting really messy, and then afterwards you look at the kitchen at the complete disaster, but the memories are there. So be like a child this time around and get a little messy, and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. And that's exactly what we're gonna do now. So now that I have a little bit of vegetable shortening on here, we are going to spread some cornmeal. And the cornmeal is going to help to slide the dough off onto our pizza stone. So this is kind of like the first step. And just take your hands, spread it around. You don't want it too thick, you want a very thin layer. Now let's take a look at our dough, and it's looking really good. So I can usually get 2 or 3 pizzas out of this. So I'm gonna take about half of the dough in here, and I'm just gonna plop it right down on there. Just like that. Now here's the fun part. With traditional dough, you would use more flour. You would get down and you would knead it, and I know that y'all have seen me do that before. But when you're working with the gluten-free dough and you're making this pizza crust, the best way to do it is to smooth it out with wet hands. And otherwise you can kind of see it's real sticky, and it's not coming off of my hands at all. So, and you can kind of tell. But it's magic when you put your hands in some water, so that I have a little bit of bowl of water right now, and I'm gonna start to smooth it out. And you can see the parts where my hand isn't wet, that the dough is sticking. So keep dipping back in. And doesn't this remind you of playing with Play-Doh when you were a little kid? It's kind of amazing. And you know, I'm a big believer in touching your food anyway, and getting in there and giving it some love and feeling how it feels, and getting an idea about what the texture is like and everything else. So as you can see, I'm kind of pushing it out into that traditional round pizza shape. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to make it round. You can make it square. You can even make it a triangle. This is about just getting in there and making it whatever you want to make it. But you see how easy it is when you spread it out with your hands? Once I have it to about the size that I want, and again with your hands, you can kind of tell the thickness. Like I can tell it's a little bit thicker back here than it is in the front, so I'm gonna work it back a little bit further here. Don't worry if it's lopsided, if it's not a perfect circle. We're gonna call this artisanal. And the last thing that I wanna do as I'm doing this is I wanna create kind of that traditional ridge that you would see on a regular pizza. Let's make that pretty there. So that our sauce and our toppings will stay in. So I'm just gonna kind of make kind of a faux crust edge here. Just like that. I don't know if you can see it or not, but all right. So now that we have it the way that we want it, we're gonna set this aside for about 10 minutes. And we're gonna let it rest, and we're gonna let the yeast work. And then after 10 minutes, we're gonna put this in the oven on top of the pizza stone. Don't take it off of the tray, because we're gonna sort of pre-bake the crust. And that's gonna let us move the crust with all of the toppings and everything right onto the pizza stone. It's gonna be super easy that way. Trust me on this one. So for the sauce, we're gonna start with 1 can of whole tomatoes. And it's not a small can, it's one of the big cans. Now, I don't like to use any of the juice. I just like to use the tomatoes, because I think if you use the juice in the can, it's gonna make the sauce way too watery. This sauce is so easy to do. So as we have that 1 can of tomatoes, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 4 cloves of minced garlic, and I love the little jars of minced garlic. It's so much easier than always chopping your own. And we use so much garlic around here that we go through the jars like crazy. And we want to add a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and I like my pizza sauce a little on the sweeter side, not too much, just a little bit. So I add 2 teaspoons of sugar. Put the top on and give that a really, really good mix. And there you have it. Really wonderful, fresh, homemade pizza sauce. Give it a little taste because we want to adjust the seasoning if the taste is a little bit off. Ooh, that's really good. It's got the vinegary, it's got a little bit of the sweet. It's going to be amazing on our pizza. So let's go ahead and set this aside. And we'll get back and take a look at our dough. Now that we have pre-baked this for about 5 minutes, you can see that it's gonna be really easy to transfer into and onto our pizza stone. However, if you do not have a pizza stone, you can leave it just like this. Go ahead and put your toppings on and put it back into the oven after you're done doing all of that kind of stuff. But we're gonna show you how to do this if you do have a pizza stone. Now I'm just making a basic margarita today, but you can get as creative as you want. I always start out with a little less sauce than I think that I need because you can always add more, but you can't take it away very easily. So just, and that looks about right. Now you're going to have leftover sauce. You're gonna have quite a bit, but it freezes beautifully and you just save it for the next time you have pizza and then you can save yourself a step. So I never mind making kind of a double batch of sauce because it kind of gets me the leg up next time we have pizza. So just put it in a Ziploc baggie or in a little container, label it and date it, and you can skip that step later on. But now we can get really creative and we can start making this pretty. So I like to add fresh mozzarella, and I get this from our local Italian market. It's called Marzanos here in St. Pete, and they just do the best stuff. I could spend all day in that market. It is just a glorious, glorious place. Put that guy right in the middle, I think. And I think just one more piece over here, because he's looking a little. Maybe turn this guy around so that it evens out. There we go. And I love the taste of basil, so I'm going to be adding quite a bit. And this basil is from my garden. And I kind of like to imagine, you know, as you're cutting the pizza, am I going to get a bite of everything? I'm going to get a bite of that really good mozzarella. Am I going to get a bite of the really, really good basil? And is that bite balanced? So if you can kind of make your artwork here, it's kind of fun. And this is where the play comes in too. Then I always like to add a little bit of salt just right on the top. And I use a mineral salt, which I really, really like. And a little bit of pepper. And just a bit of olive oil. Go slow and just drizzle it ever so slowly. Don't want too much. Now, like I said, you can leave it just like this. If you do not have a pizza stone, it goes back into the oven, 450 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes until it's all nice and brown and bubbly. Or if you do have a pizza stone, this is where we're gonna transfer the pizza to that stone. And what the stone does is it's just gonna give you that really good, crusty, kind of a little bit burnt bottom on the pizza, and it's just gonna give you that really good snap and crackle as you're doing that. Now, I wouldn't want you to take the pizza stone out of the oven. You would just kind of get down in your oven and push the pizza onto that. But since it's harder for us to kind of show you what that looks like, I'm gonna take my pizza stone out of the oven and then show you how to slide it on. I would not recommend doing that at home. Leave the pizza stone in the oven, get down there and just slide your pizza onto that. Don't do it the way that I'm doing. Do as I say, not as I do. So let me get that pizza stone out of the oven and I'll show you how to transfer it. So this pan is still a little bit hot from when we took it out of the oven. And I'm actually using my husband's grill glove, and it works perfectly. We found it at Lowe's. It's really, really great. So hold your pan, and you're just gonna want to very easily slide it right onto the pizza. And again, that cornmeal and the vegetable shortening we put on that makes it really, really great. If you need to adjust any of the toppings after sliding, you can do that too. Now it's back into the oven, 450 degrees, for 15 to 20 minutes until it's nice and brown and bubbly. Look how amazing our pizza turned out. I cannot wait to take a bite of this. It is gonna be so, so good. And I've been craving pizza lately so much. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you're already subscribed, hit that notification bell and that'll let you know whenever I have a new video up. Thanks for joining me this time. Now I'm gonna go eat some of this pizza.